Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on.
Paramedic Creepy DOA by V. Marie 123. I'm a paramedic in a busy city. I'm typically one of two paramedics on the overnight, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. About 2 weeks ago, I went to a call for a cardiac arrest, and my job was to obviously attempt to make them undead, and if salvageable, bring them to a hospital for care. Upon arrival at this apartment building, I met with firefighter EMTs and 2 police officers. As I walked up to the front door, there was a man sitting in a patio chair smoking a cigarette. He was wearing a white wife beater and his eyes looked blank, like the lights on but nobody's home kind of stare. You know, the one people give you when they first wake up out of a deep sleep. Honestly, I just assumed he was a drug addict or something and nodded and didn't say anything because I don't give patient information out to bystanders. He looked at me and said, Hey, I remember you. Is he all right up there?" I got a bad feeling about the man. I don't really know how to explain it. I'm very desensitized to the sick and dead people that I deal with, and I typically don't feel emotion anymore when dealing with things like death and sickness or injury. But that man just gave me a bad and dark feeling. I tried not to think about it and went upstairs to the 3rd floor apartment. I saw the same exact man upstairs with rigor and lividity at the end of a bed in a small bedroom, obviously dead. He was at the foot of a twin-sized mattress on his knees with blood around his feet and appeared to have had some injury to the back of his head. I confirmed that he was dead medically and left my DOA with the officer and went downstairs to notify who I assumed was his twin brother or something, because nobody else was on the scene besides his neighbor who found him. But the man wasn't there anymore. I asked the neighbor where the man had gone and if he had a twin, but the neighbor had absolutely no idea what I was talking about. And no man had been seen outside smoking a cigarette by the other fire and police officers on scene. No one had any idea what I was talking about. But I know that man was there. Who he was or where he went, I'll never know. Man Hiding in My Porch by Cormegaflow. About 2 nights ago, I went to see the new Wicked movie with my family, who was in town for Thanksgiving. I arrived back at my house around midnight. I live alone in a shared but divided house with 2 other tenants living inside. One is upstairs and one splits the downstairs with me, so there's 3 apartments total. My place is in the back of the house and has a back porch you can enter through after walking up the whole driveway. When I got home, I sat in my bedroom and did about 20 or 30 minutes of work on my computer. During this time, the house was very quiet, and I kept hearing a man's voice continuously talking. Now, keep in mind, the tenant above me is a man, and I know his bedroom is right above mine because I previously lived up there. It sounded like he was talking on the phone, just because of how long and continuous the talking went on. I tried to listen and figure out where the voice was coming from, and I couldn't exactly pinpoint it, but it was either coming from through the ceiling or on the other side of my room. I have to note that my bedroom connects to the porch with a door that I have blocked with my dresser. There's a main door inside the porch that you use to get into the house, but there's also this strange door connecting to my room. I couldn't make out the words, but because of how firm and continuous the voice was going on, I figured it just had to be coming from my housemate upstairs. It's the only thing that made logical sense. I just kept on thinking, though, I had never heard a single voice come through that ceiling before. It's not that thin. And then I thought, whatever, I'm worrying about nothing. After about 20 or 30 minutes of computer work, I got up to brush my teeth, feed my fish, and get ready for bed. I went back into my room, turned off the lights, and got into bed. Keep in mind, it had been about 45 or 60 minutes since I first heard the voice, and I could still hear it. Damn, I thought. My housemate is chatting up a storm on the phone up there. And oh, how wrong I was. After about 3 minutes of laying in bed, I all of a sudden heard my porch door creaking along with the talking man's voice. It had a very distinct sound that I knew immediately was my porch door. I crept across my room and put my ear to the dresser door that connects to the porch. Sure enough, the talking was coming from inside my porch, and I could hear the door moving and shuffling inside my porch along with it. My heart absolutely dropped. All the lights were off in my house at this point, so I had a sort of sneaky advantage to creep around and get a view of what was going on. I crept down the hallway and peered into the kitchen, which the porch leads into. Across the kitchen, through the door and in a streak of moonlight, I saw a man with long, scraggly hair sitting curled up in the center of my porch, turned around with his back to me, muttering out loud to himself and rocking back and forth. My fight or flight kicked in, and I immediately ripped the door and started screaming at him to get out and tried to intimidate him. Looking back, I probably shouldn't have made myself so vulnerable without a weapon handy, but like I said, I was just in fight or flight, and I couldn't explain my actions in the moment other than reacting out of fear and determination to scare him off. Anyway, the dude didn't even react to me whipping open the door and screaming at him. Not even a flinch. He simply turned his head to the side very slowly and said, "My name is Evan." That freaked me out so much for some reason, especially because he still hadn't turned around or shown his face. I said, "I don't care," and kept cursing at him to leave. And he slowly rose up with his hands up and said, I know, I'm hiding." He wasn't saying it in a pleading way, though. He said it with this almost childlike, playful tone that freaked me the absolute fuck out. I hated this. The fact that he kept trying to reason with me and act so mysterious while still not even turning around to show his face just pissed me off, honestly. I mean, who did he think he was? I ran him off of the porch and was just threatening him. Now, I assume it was just a homeless man who was under the influence of something, as I do live in an inner city area, and it's common to see homeless people near my street. But I don't know, man. The sight of seeing him on my porch and knowing he was there for at least an hour beforehand while I was sitting right there just freaked me the fuck out. I was in full-blown defense mode by the time I opened the door, and I wasn't willing to waste any time to do a character dive on the guy. No imaginable situation would permit anyone to be on my porch like that at that hour. Needless to say, I'll be double-checking my porch lock every night from now on. It's funny because having my room connected to the porch, I always had this horrific, intrusive thought that I'd hear someone in there one night. Looks like that came true. So please, Evan, let's not ever meet again, you creepy bastard. Something Was in My Home by He Who Buried the Light. I have something that still haunts me to this day, so a bit of backstory leading up to the situation. In 2016, I was living in Denver, Colorado. I was in high school at the time and had a good, decent job that was paying me well, but fired me for being a metal and techno music blaster as I did the job. My family and I moved due to dear old dad getting into it with a landlord, resulting in, well, I can't really say here. We moved a few months later to a city in southern Colorado because rent was cheap there, and still is. I am a bit of a horror and paranormal lover, so naturally stuff like skinwalkers or werewolves draws me in. Something about it just speaks to me to check it out, and being a horror nerd, it was a good time hearing and reading such stories, even the ones that are true. But no one realizes how horrifying things can get when you're met with the real thing. It's unclear to me if these are evil shamans or spirits, but I can tell you that on a warm night in 2021, it was a night that put things into perspective on why you should never want something like this to show up. The night was like any other. I had just gotten home from a new job, and I cleaned a call center and relaxed with some Destiny 2 with friends in one ear and listening to a Navajo shaman talk about skinwalkers and their history in the other. Needless to say, things got very dark to me. After a few hours, I called it quits on Destiny 2 with the lads as we were doing Vanguard Nightfall missions that night to get a certain heavy ammo using a grenade launcher. We succeeded in getting some good rolls, but alas, we're not here to talk about Destiny. About 3 hours after I went to bed, I was woken up by a pair of glowing red eyes just watching me. I couldn't move. My body was locked in place as if it was screaming at me, "Don't move. Don't move or you're dead." Now this is where things take a turn. I was still living with my family when this happened, so you can bet not only was I scared and unable to move, I was scared of what it would do to my mother and younger brother and sick father. I could feel and hear my own heart beating, slowing down, and then the growling came. It started getting close to my bed, this growling, and on occasion it was snarling. It was pitch black in the room, and all I could see was its eyes, these blood-red, angry eyes that were telling me, "The world you know has ended. What happens now is my choice." It felt like an eternity, but it backed off and I could move again. But I didn't want to. Why? This thing was still there staring at me and growling as if testing me or seeing what I was going to do to it, so it could do what it really wanted to do to me. I never took my eyes off its eyes, not even to shut my eyes and wish for it to go. But in the words of a Mr. Quint, sometimes it doesn't go away. I was thinking scared that this had to be a nightmare. It had to be that at any moment I would wake up to my bedroom light on and my younger brother slapping me to wake me up from my dream. But it wasn't, and I didn't get such mercy. After a long time, the sun started to rise and the eyes disappeared without a trace. Not taking any chances, I grabbed my handgun and did a sweep of the house. My mom was terrified, and Dad just laid there asking me what the hell sounded like a warped chainsaw. But my brother saw it too, and he gave us a description. I remember his words to a damn T. He said it looked like some skinny tall person with a wolf's head, and that it had stared at him for a bit too. He said the teeth looked like a bunch of knives and the hands like humans with Freddy Krueger claws going on. He said he didn't know what the hell it was, but that he didn't ever want to see it again. Dad went into a yelling fit, blaming me for giving them all nightmares by playing some horror flicks when I went to bed. That's just what he chalked it up to, but I had never done that. Hours later, Mom took me for a drive and parked at the city park and asked me, "What the hell was that thing last night?" I told her that I didn't know, but whatever the hell it wasn't friendly, not in the slightest. The following weeks, bad luck happened to our family. My runs in D2 went to hell. My job was on my ass saying I never cleaned and missed a lot of spots when I never did miss a spot. But it came to a point where I told them to stick it and quit during that time. The employees of the call center gave their support for me, and I thanked them for that as they said they'd never had any problems with me at all, and everything had been cleaned to the point that they could eat off the break room or bathroom floors. They couldn't understand why my boss was losing his mind with me. So I went to a shaman out in the rural parts of the city and told him what had happened. What he said next was, "You drew it to you with your interest, and it took interest in you not because you are a negative energy buffet, even though you try to be polite and nice. You must have some native blood in your family tree." Then he said, "It's still out there watching you. I don't know if it was an evil spirit or a skinwalker, but I'll tell you what. I'll get a priest friend of mine and bless your house ASAP for free. It will keep it away as long as you don't feed it or attract it any further." I paid the shaman and then donated to his priest friend's church. 2 days later, Dad's health went all to hell so bad that it was time for hospice. 3 days later, my dad called and had me, my mom, and my brother go to see him one last time. We said our goodbyes, but Mom and my brother left, and my dad asked me to stay to have one last conversation. He started, "I saw it in my window last night, son. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything I've done to you and the hell I put you and your brother and mother through. I'm so sorry. I thought that it was a horror movie that you had blaring that night. I know you hate me and you have every right to do so. You can tell me off and yell and scream and curse at me. I've made peace with God. But son, know this. It's still out there. It's waiting for you. Take care of your mother and your brother and keep that thing far away from them. I know you'll do the right thing." Those were the last words my dad spoke to me before he died. He died right in front of me. And at that point I said aloud, "You know, the dead have settled their debts and it's time for the living to pick up the tab. I'll do my best and that thing will never get near my family as long as I still draw breath. Rest in peace, Dad. May you find more peace in the afterlife than you did here." I should say that my father and I had a rocky relationship when I turned into a teen around 2016. I stopped acting like him and became a better person, though. Dad was kind of a jerk with delusions of wealth and grandeur, and I always butted heads with him on how he treated people in the house and in public, even traded punches on a few occasions. But what really pissed me off is my dad passed away around that time, and that thing that came into my house to show me that it could easily get to me and my family if it so chose to kill us all. We moved from that house into an apartment due to hard times, and yes, I'm still living in the same city. But whenever I recount or remember or speak of this incident, I feel like I'm being watched. Even a border collie I adopted named Emmy growls at a closet or the front door at night. I know whatever it is out there, and it's waiting for its moment. And I'll be waiting right now for it, that I have a sense of what I might be up against. Thanks for listening to this. I'll never forget this, and I think that this thing is going to follow me to the grave. Never forget there are forces in this world we will never understand. But also, never paint a target on your back, because then they will come. A Night I'll Never Forget by Raghavendra. I've never been the kind of person to believe in ghosts or supernatural things, but after what happened this night, I don't think I'll ever be the same. I live in Pune, a bustling city in India where life doesn't stop no matter the hour. When this happened, it was a cold winter evening, and I was at my desk sipping coffee, lost in my own world. My mom called out and asked me to get some medicine for her. But being the procrastinator that I am, I pushed it off, saying that I would go later. Time flew by, and soon it was 11 p.m. The streets were quiet, with the kind of eerie calm that only comes late at night. I grabbed my jacket, my bike keys, and headed out to the 24/7 medical store nearby. After picking up the medicine, I felt the urge to go for a late-night ride, something I often do to clear my head. There was a small bridge not too far from my place, surrounded by towering trees and shadowed by tall buildings in the distance. The bridge has a kind of haunting beauty to it, especially at night. Beneath it runs a dam, and when it's open, the rushing water creates a mesmerizing, soothing symphony. And here's where things get unsettling. In India, We don't bury the dead, we cremate them. And this bridge, it has 4 cremation sites around it, 2 at either end of the bridge. I didn't think much of it. Again, I'm not superstitious, and honestly, I never believed in ghosts. It was midnight when I got to the bridge, and I parked my bike near the start of it, lit a cigarette, and put on some music. The cold breeze whispered through the trees, and the distant sound of water made the setting almost surreal. At the far end of the bridge, I noticed a pyre burning, a body being cremated. I decided to stay where I was and not disturb the rituals. And an hour passed, and I felt it was time to head home. But to do that, I'd have to pass by the cremation site. I started my bike and began riding slowly. The closer I got, the more aware I became of the burning pyre. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A shadow. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, but as I got closer, the shadow became clearer. It was a man squatting right next to the burning pyre. I slowed down to get a better look, and what I saw still haunts me to this day. He was scratching his head violently, almost like he was trying to tear his scalp off. His movements were frantic, jerky, and unnatural. His hair was catching fire from the pyre, but he didn't seem to care. Instead, he rocked back and forth, making these guttural, animalistic sounds. My heart froze. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but my body wouldn't move. Then, he turned. In a flash, faster than anything I've ever seen, he snapped his head towards me. I'll never forget that sound. A sharp, crackling zap like static electricity. His face was illuminated by the flames, and his eyes were hollow, empty pits that seemed to swallow the light around them. I don't know how, but I managed to kill my headlights and twist the throttle, desperate to get away without drawing his attention. But as I passed him, I felt a cold, piercing gaze, as if he was looking straight into my soul. I didn't dare look back. My hands trembled, my body was drenched in sweat despite the cold, and I rode faster than I ever have, praying that he wouldn't follow. When I reached home, I locked every door and window, my heart still pounding in my chest. That night, I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I woke up with a high fever that lasted for 2 days. When I finally gathered the courage to visit the bridge in daylight, there was nothing. No signs of anyone, no evidence of what I'd seen. To this day, I don't know if it was a ghost, a hallucination, or something else entirely. But one thing is certain. I'll never go near that bridge at night again. The Intruder by Ashley. I would first like to state that I'm 17 now. I still live with my parents, and I live in a building in an area where crime doesn't typically occur. This incident happened 8 months ago, and I get terrified when I hear the slightest sounds at night still. For starters, I have a dog. To be precise, a Yorkshire Terrier. Yorkshire Terriers are known to be small, but they can be so fucking loud, and my dog is literally the definition of an ankle biter. But despite her size, she's still pretty big, weighing around 17 pounds. Our dog has a terrible habit of drinking a shit ton of water at night and then waking us up to go pee. We have a patio as we are on the first floor, and it's pretty spacious, surrounded by a huge wall and a black fence that is sharp at the top to avoid any possible robbery. Like I said before, my area isn't known for high crime, but we have had encounters of people looking to steal quarters from our laundry machines. I wasn't fully asleep, but sure, my eyes were closed, and I could hear everything. Since the apartment is small and has only one bedroom, I didn't have much of an option but to share a bedroom with my parents, but I'm still grateful that I do because I don't think I'd be able to sleep alone now after what happened. Yeah, call me a coward. I'm genuinely terrified. I heard my mom wake up groggy and pissed off because my dog started licking her. Usually when my dog licks, it's because she needs to go outside to do her business. My mom stood up and opened our patio door and let my dog outside. And at that moment, my dog started barking furiously and whimpering. My mom, being curious, went back down to check what the fuck was going on. And that's when I heard bloody screams from my mom, like horror movie screams. I bolted up, and my mom came running inside the apartment screaming, "Wake up! There's someone on our patio!" The moment I heard that shit, my blood ran cold. I'm so thankful my dad wasn't fully asleep either, and he got up, and so did I. I followed after him, and my first instinct for some reason was to protect my family, which is stupid because I'm a 17-year-old female that can't even do 10 push-ups. But anyway, I grabbed a knife from our kitchen and went outside with my dad. I stepped outside to see a guy standing in our garden, holding garden scissors. My dad yelled at him, "Get the fuck out of here or I'll call the police." The guy turned around and dropped the scissors and started begging my dad not to kill him. I'm not going to lie, this guy seemed out of it like he was high. Then he got up all wobbly and jumped over the back sharp fence and didn't leave, but instead started pacing back and forth, completely deranged. I don't know why, and I'm still pissed at my parents for this. They didn't call the police, and when I asked why, they just said that they'd explain it later. My dog was still barking loudly at the guy, so my parents sent me and my dog to our bedroom and locked us inside so we would be safe. I contemplated calling the police. I should have. But hey, my parents knew what was best, right? Eventually, I fell asleep. I had given up on waiting. The next morning I woke up and I asked my mom what was wrong, and she said that the guy who broke in was apparently looking for his girlfriend who lived in our building, but on the second floor. He was going to climb our balcony to get to her apartment. She said she didn't want to call the police because she knew who he was, but she found it weird because the guy kept saying he jumped over the fence to protect us because he had seen someone else break into our apartment. Trust me, when my mom told me, I literally made a what the fuck face. Since the man was high, I didn't question it though because he was batshit crazy. But the crazy thing is, right after I got home from school, my mom told me she saw the guy roaming around again, and he went up to her and apologized. He said he was sorry for scaring us and that he was high as a kite, and that's why he had acted that way. Anyway, I still don't know what to make of the situation, except that the guy had traumatized me. Even though I don't know his intentions and what he had planned to do, I hope he's actually getting all the help he needs. As for my dog, I'm grateful she's still here to protect us, as without her, I don't know what might have happened to my mom, my dad, to us. Messenger of Death by Answers in the Dark. I'd like to preface my story with a bit of background regarding my experiences. In the past 10 years, ever since I was about 15 years old, I've had some profound paranormal experiences. These happenings never happened one after another, but instead I would witness something and then it would be a year or so before I would have another encounter. The only exception to that is when I first began to experience things, and then it was much more frequent. On an occasion where some being or entity would make itself known to me, I found I seemed to go through the same emotional stages. Also, I might add that every experience I have had has been while I was alone. At first, I would begin to feel uneasy, like I was being watched. And almost always that came on suddenly, as in a complete shift in my mood. One minute I would be completely peaceful and at ease, without the slightest thought in my head that would suggest feeling any other way. But then quickly, as my uneasiness grew, every fiber in my body and soul knew without a doubt that I was not alone. Unseen, there is someone or something that was with me. At those points, I would be filled with dread, and then the presence would make itself known. Usually, my experiences didn't involve anything physical. I've never been touched nor harmed in any way, but I will experience terror unlike anything the physical world has come close to making me feel. Most times, that happened as I was settling to go into sleep. In those instances, what will happen is my whole body will lock up in fear, and I won't move, I won't blink. I'll only be able to stare. The feeling I receive in return from this entity is usually at an amusement at my fear. I have normally experienced that as the intensity grows, I usually fall faint or just fall asleep. I really don't know what happens. I wake up soon after, and I can feel that the presence is gone, and even though it is so vivid and real when it happens, it stays with me for a week after the incidents. But then the reality of it all soon fades, and I'll find myself doubting that it could have actually happened. But in my heart and mind, if I think back on these things, they all come back so clearly and real as any other memory I've ever had, and as real as remembering my wedding or driving to work this morning. But my question is, how can something that strange and intense fade so quickly? And how do I go through the exact same motions every time? I find myself wrestling with so much doubt about the possibility of it all that when I'm reading other stories, trying to find clarity in someone that might understand and relate to my experiences, that I find myself saying, "That's ridiculous. There's no way that's real." But really, how can I say such a thing with what I've seen? I think that even though these things are purposefully exposing themselves to me, there is something spiritual that is put in place by them, or who knows what, the universe, something that represses the experience afterwards without any conscious effort. Anyway, I wanted to share one story that is not quite like the rest. This happened a year or two after everything started happening with me. I was living with my parents at the time and was around 17 years old. Our house was in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, in an unincorporated part of the town near the chain of lakes. In this area, there are plenty of foxes, coyotes, raccoons, and the like, as our neighborhood was surrounded by forest preserves. In our neighborhood, there were two streets that ran parallel to one another, which extended from the main highway, moved downhill and onward toward the lake. The two streets eventually come together at the bottom of the hill in a horseshoe shape which connects them. Our house was located at the bottom of that horseshoe. On that particular night, my car had been parked up the hill. It was late, around midnight or so, and it was my turn to take the garbage cans out to the road for pickup in the morning. I had been procrastinating doing it as I was big into World of Warcraft at the time and had been busy with that for most of my day. Everyone in the house was asleep, as it was a school night. I decided it was time to get off my lazy butt and take care of the garbage, as well as move my car back into the driveway. I stepped outside into a dark fall night, leaves covering the ground and the world dimly lit by nothing but the moon's glow. I grabbed onto a garbage can and began rolling it down our rather long driveway, about 6 car lengths. As I approached the end of the driveway, I noticed something odd looking across the street and about 10 yards to my left. What I thought I was seeing was a very large dog, much larger than normal. I could see no discerning features of the dog. I was just observing it from a sideways profile, and basically what I saw was that it was darker and blacker than anything surrounding it. I could see that it had a wolfish or wild look to its fur. I couldn't see its eyes, nose, or anything specific, but the oddest thing was that it was next to my neighbor's mailbox, and it was as tall, if not taller, than that mailbox. At that realization, I froze in my steps. Now, let me say, I have no irrational fear of dogs or wild animals. I've been surrounded by large dogs my entire life, and I love them to death, and know how to handle and approach dogs that I've never met. But for some reason, though, this particular dog had me scared for my life. As I stood at the end of my driveway and my fear and anxiety began to grow, the animal or apparition began to move, which quickly became the most disturbing part about the encounter. The dog moved unlike any living animal I've ever seen. It seemed to be moving in slow motion, not just walking slow, but lurking. It took notice of me and began its slow, methodical march, stalking just behind the mailboxes at the opposite side of the street. When it moved forward, it seemed to almost be floating by, and it stared at me the entire time, though I couldn't see its face. As it phased past me and further to my right, I was filled with the thought that I had to get to my car, which was about 50 feet up the street to my left, and I just had to shine my lights on this. I would never, ever think to run an animal over, but the presence of this thing felt so threatening that in my mind I had already decided that I would sprint to my car and run it over if I could. As the beast moved further to my right, I took off in a sprint towards my car. My heart was beating out of my chest and my adrenaline was like jet fuel in my veins. I was too afraid to even look over my shoulder and see if this thing had decided to give chase to me. I jumped in my car, and as I shined my headlights onto the street, I just saw its tail sticking out from behind nothing but the metal post of a street sign, with no one on the other side. I put my car into drive, and as I moved closer to the sign with this tail protruding from it, the tail seemed to move forward past the sign and disappear into nothing. I circled the street several times and drove through the neighborhood to try and locate this thing, but I couldn't find it. I had little sleep that night. I called my girlfriend, scared out of my mind, asking her to help me rationalize what had just happened. She seemed disturbed by what I was telling her and asked me if I ever heard of the black dog omen. I had no idea what she was talking about, and she said she thought it was supposed to be a messenger of death. That freaked me out, and I was afraid for me and my family and our other loved ones' lives. And I kid you not, less than a week later, my neighbor committed suicide, and so did someone about 5 houses down from us the same week. So, you tell me, did I truly see a messenger of death? He lived in my house, by Anonymous. For privacy reasons, I won't give my name or age. And for a bit of context, this happened about 2 years ago, a few weeks after my little brother was born. Ever since we moved into our current house, there's been this small room in the basement that's always locked. To show how little anyone uses it, I don't even know what's in there. But I've always assumed it's just utility stuff like meters or something. The room is really tiny, barely big enough to lie down in. But let's get into it. My parents went away for a weekend together, leaving me, my older sister, and my baby brother, who was just a few weeks old at the time, home. My parents trusted us to take care of ourselves since they'd done this before. That night, my sister went out with friends and wasn't planning to come back until 4 or 5 in the morning. I just watched a good movie, and since it was already getting late, I decided to put my little brother to bed in his room upstairs. I did that and went back down to watch another movie, but I ended up falling asleep. About 2 or 3 hours later, around midnight, I woke up to these strange noises coming from upstairs. At first I thought it was just the neighbors, since they can be pretty loud and the walls are thin. But then I looked at the time and realized it was too late for them to still be awake, let alone making that kind of noise. So I got closer to the stairs to investigate, and just as I was about to go up the first step, I heard the sound of something metal falling on the ground. Guess what? It was the key to the small room in the basement. I immediately grabbed my phone, and instead of calling the police, I texted my friends to tell them what was happening. Some of my friends had the brilliant idea of calling the police for me, and suddenly I heard the bathroom door slam shut. I knew it was that door because it makes a very specific creaking noise when it closes. I remembered my brother was sleeping upstairs, so I carefully went up to check out if he was okay. And thankfully, he was fine. Still not fully grasping how much danger I was in, I went to the bathroom door. Since it opened inward, I decided to violently push it open, and I heard a man scream. I immediately shut the door and held it closed to keep him from getting out. He broke the window, and outside the bathroom there's this sort of balcony. Not a proper one, but you get the idea, that connects to the balconies of the neighboring houses, which are all really close together. He used that to escape. I ran and got my brother, grabbed him in my arms, then ran to the kitchen, and noticed that one of the knives was missing from the knife block. I picked up another one and crouched in a corner of the living room, crying like never before. Then the police arrived, and I opened the door for them. When they searched the house, they confirmed that the bathroom window was indeed broken, and I had hit the guy so hard with the door that there was blood on the floor. But the most shocking and traumatizing part was what they found in that small basement room. There were blankets and cans of food. They concluded that he'd been living there for several days. And that's it. I will say, though, that I hesitated a lot before posting this, because it really has affected me. The ARP Warden by Tiger Feet. These events took place in southeast London back in the 1980s. A long time ago, when I was dating my ex-husband, he was living in a dingy basement flat that was so damp a previous tenant had actually nailed the wallpaper to the wall. I was okay going there for the first couple of weeks, until I needed to go to the loo one lovely sunny afternoon. I duly trotted upstairs to the revolting bathroom shared by all the tenants. So far, so good. But coming back down, I saw a man in a World War II ARP Warden's uniform looking out of the window at the back of the first floor of the house. For those of you who don't know what the ARP was, it was a group of very brave men and women who patrolled the streets at night when most of the air raids took place during the war. They were called Air Raid Precaution Wardens, or ARPs. Part of their job was to tell people whose blackout blinds or curtains were not totally lightproof to cover their windows, and also to sound warnings and generally try to protect people when an air raid took place by getting them down into the public bomb shelters, or into their own bomb shelters. And that was all after doing a full day's work, too. Anyway, I digress. My ARP warden was standing and looking out of the window at two children and their parents. The father was wearing a Royal Navy uniform, and he was playing with a ball in the back garden. He was totally focused on the little family, and then started shouting and banging on the window, trying to get the family to the safety of the Anderson shelter in the garden. Anderson shelters were sort of an upside-down U-shape with a hole underneath it big enough to take the residents of the house, and was made from corrugated iron supported by wooden supports and covered over with earth, where families often grew vegetables. The warden that I saw turned around and went to the top of the stairs and promptly vanished, but I did hear footsteps running down the stairs very fast. When I looked out of the window to see if he'd made it to the back garden, the family had vanished, and all was quiet in the garden. I saw them quite often after this, and of course it piqued my interest about what had happened in the house. I went to the local library and into the local history department. There, I found out that a bomb had landed behind the house my ex was living in. The family living there had been killed by debris raining down on them and the subsequent fire. My ARP warden was also killed as he ran out of the house in an attempt to get the family into the air raid shelter. I found it very sad, especially as the family in the garden were really enjoying their time together, probably whilst the father was home on leave. I saw this scene play out 3 times in all, and each time I could feel my tears welling up, knowing that all of them died. Even now, remembering it after all this time, I still have tears in my eyes in 2024. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like to hear narrated on this channel or my podcast, email it to unclejosh.truescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you could do me a favor and you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, tell your friends about it, and maybe even become a subscriber. Follow me on social media, links to that are in the description. And if you'd like to take your support of this channel even further, find a link to my Patreon page or consider purchasing some Uncle Josh or Campfire Crew merchandise. A link to my TeePublic storefront is also in the description. Make great Christmas gifts, guys. Okay, that was cheesy, but I had to say it. Everyone, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.